Hello again to a new video around data governance and identity manager. Matt, we are back, and what we will see today.
In this video, we're going to talk about resource activity specifically. So the agents collect both security and activity. We'll talk about the platforms that actually support the collection of activity. We'll talk about why we collect activity in the first place. And then we'll talk about the data flow, how resource activity goes from the agents all the way to the DGE server, all the way to the databases, and then some basic troubleshooting as well.
Nice. And we start again.
So for resource activity, we have a lot of platforms that we support, but not all of the platforms will support the collecting of resource activities. It really depends on the type of the platform that you deploy an agent to monitor. So we'll go through the list. Local Windows computers, yes, resource activity, fully supported. You get all activities. No problem there with local Windows computer. We deploy the agent locally. You're good to go. Remote Windows, no, you do not get resource activity. The only exception to that is you get real-time security updates, which means we can watch for security changes remotely on Windows. But that's it. You don't get things like file opens, closes, nothing else like that. Same thing goes for Windows clusters, which is basically like remote Windows. You do not get any resource activity with the exception of security changes. So for NetApp, we have NetApp running in CIFS mode and also NFS mode. So for both NetApp modes, CIFS or NFS, yes, we do collect activity through F policy. So again, with NetApp, you need to have F policy running, which we can deploy automatically. As long as there's F policy, either CIFS or NFS, we will support it, right? If you're running in cluster mode. And then the other version of NetApp is 7 mode. So if you're running ONTAP 7.3 to 8.2 or 8.3, I'm not sure what version 7 mode was discontinued, but if you do have 7 mode NetApp, either in CIFS based or NTFS, CIFS, NFS based, either of those, the answer again is yes. We have resource activity supported on both of those. So as long as you have F policy there, then we can collect all those activities. For EMC, again, we have 2 different file systems supported. We have CIFS or NFS, and the answer for both of those is yes. So on your EMC Isilon devices, your VNX, if they're either running on with CIFS or NFS, then DGE can support all activity collection. For your SharePoint farm, so SharePoint 2010 or SharePoint 2013, as long as you have the activity enabled by default on SharePoint, so again, the DGE doesn't just monitor, it actually requires SharePoint to be collecting those audit events natively, and then DGE will be able to read from those SharePoint APIs, from that SharePoint database. So yes for SharePoint. For generic host type, the answer is a resounding no. For generic, we cannot collect any type of activity. So if you have an SMB share out there, you want it to watch as a generic device, which means you're just collecting security. There is no way for DGE to collect any type of activity from there. So no security changes, no file opens or moves or anything. Generic, the answer is no. And then finally, our last host type is DFS, so distributed file system. The answer is yes with a but. So we do allow you to collect and report on activity from DFS, but it's not actually DFS-based activity. If we have agents deployed to the servers that host the shares that those DFS folders represent, then if you run activity reports on DFS routes, we will actually cross-reference that internally with the underlying activities on the folders that host the data represented by those DFS folders. So the answer is yes, that we do collect activities with the assumption that you do have an agent on the machine where that actual physical folder exists. And then again, cross-reference in the reports. So today we're going to talk about resource activity. So with DGE, you deploy agents to watch, to scan security, and to monitor activity on your file systems, your NAS devices, SharePoint, etc. So an agent goes out there, it starts scanning security under its managed paths, but it also can be configured to watch for activity, right? So here we have this file server, which is mmdim 702. When you go to edit host settings, and you would set these when you first deploy, but here's the host settings, resource activity tab. By default, when you deploy an agent, no activity is selected. You have the option here, no activity or collect and aggregate events. The default option is no activity because we want people to be conscious and aware of the decisions they're making with what they're enabling on their managed hosts. In this particular case, I have collect and aggregate events turned on. I have all these activities being monitored on this particular managed host, which is a local Windows server. Now in this case, I also have read enabled. By default, read should be turned off, but I've enabled read because I just want more actions to be visible during this demo. But generally speaking, read should not be enabled, right? But for now, we're just going to keep it enabled. Aggregation, I have that set to be 5 minutes. And we have 4 options here. We have 5 minutes, 1 hour, 8 hours, and 1 day. These aggregation levels on a per managed host basis are basically saying that, for example, if I have a 1 hour aggregation window, and during that 1 hour, I am accessing the same file 10 times within that hour. I'm opening it up, I'm reading the contents of that file 10 times, and I've written to the file 5 times. At the end of that hour, the agent who's been monitoring and collecting these activities is actually going to say, okay, let me look at all the activities I've collected. Well, Matt has read this specific file 10 times. I'm going to send information up to the DGE server that says between the hours of 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock p.m., Matt read this file 10 times. Between the hours of 1 o'clock and 2 p.m., Matt wrote to this file 5 times. So it's an aggregation of the total activities. You wouldn't be able to look at the activity that gets collected and know precisely within that hour when Matthew wrote to the file either of those 5 times. So I wouldn't know that Matthew wrote it at 10 minutes past, at 15 minutes past, etc. The aggregation hides that from you, so you have counts. And the reason we do that, again, is because we're not an auditing tool, but we do use activity for calculation of perceived owner. And I'm going to show that later. For now, we're going to leave that there at 5 minutes. Resource activity exclusions. We have some default exclusions in terms of accounts. So if any of the accounts in the exclusion list perform activities, we do not report them to the DGE activity database. You can add new trustees if you want, or you can remove them. File extensions, we're not interested in looking at things like temp files, log files, etc. Again, this is a default exclusion list, which you're free to edit. And you can put some folders in here that will be completely ignored for activity if they're underneath data roots, right? So again, default exclusions of folders you can add and remove. For now, I'm not going to touch my default exclusion list. And I don't need to change anything here because this is just the settings I wanted to show you what we have set for resource activity. So on the agent side, here's my agent directory. And the agent has actually been sitting there watching for activities ever since I deployed it. And I deployed it yesterday, I believe. So we have the agent log. And here, if I open up the agent log, we get this log viewer. And the log viewer is going to show you all of the actions that the agent has been doing in terms of starting up, anytime it sends information up to the DGE server, etc. At the very bottom here, you can see there's some messages on the agent side, which are sending update resource usage in one part, sending update resource usage in one part. Basically, this is telling you that the agent is collecting activities, and at the aggregation window, it is going to be sending that data up to the DGE server. So this is just an indication. If you're concerned that, well, is activity actually working, then open up the agent log and then you'll be able to see, right? So that's the agent log. So now over here, I'm going to switch to a different machine really quickly. Here I'm logged in as my sister Pam. So Pam is logged into her desktop, and here she's accessing this network share on MMDIM 702. We have an agent deployed on MM702, and she's been accessing resources within the sister stuff share. So here there's some text files, things to buy in Berlin. You open that up, everything, clothes, more clothes. So Pam is a shopper. She likes to shop, right? So there you go. And then, of course, there's the things that interest Pam and Jennifer, both of my sisters. She's been modifying this file as well. Shopping, wine, food, shopping again. Of course, it's my sister. And buying things for Matthew's birthday. And then finally, we have a directory here, which is hide from our brother Matthew. What to buy Matthew for his birthday. And we have the Audi R8 and the BMW M3. So that's really nice of my sisters to buy those for me. So again, she's logged into her desktop. She's been performing some activities. Now, when we switch back to the manager, and what we can do, after those activities have been collected by the agent and sent up to the DGE server, the DGE server has a connection to its activity database, right? Now, switching really quickly over to SQL Server, you can see here's my activity database. The DIM 702 activity, that's what I named it. You can name it what you want. It's a very small schema for database, highly normalized. And then here in the audit usage, I just did a select top 100. You can see some activities are actually showing up in here. It's hard to read them, but you can actually look in audit name and you can see that there's actually some resources in here that have been sent from the agent to the DGE server, and the DGE server sends them back up into the DG activity database. Now, the only reason I'm showing you this is that I wanted to show you where the data goes, the raw data sent from the agent to the DGE server. However, you should not actually talk or touch any of the data within this database. It's purely there for the DGE server. The DGE server has its own method of reporting on this data. I just wanted to show you where the data goes.